The year 2025 saw the reignition of trade tensions between the United States and Canada, specifically targeting the steel and aluminum industries. It began with a threat. The U.S., under then-President Trump, threatened to impose a hefty 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum imports. This aggressive move sent shockwaves through the Canadian economy and put Ontario, a major steel and aluminum producer, on high alert. The threat was not taken lightly. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, known for his tough stance, immediately vowed to retaliate if the U.S. followed through. The situation escalated quickly. The U.S., citing national security concerns, argued that Canadian imports were harming American industries. Canada, however, maintained that its steel and aluminum trade was fair and posed no threat to U.S. security. The back-and-forth rhetoric intensified, setting the stage for a potential trade war. Despite diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation, the U.S. remained steadfast in its position. This ultimately led to the implementation of a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports, including those from Canada. The imposition of tariffs marked a turning point in U.S.-Canada trade relations. It signaled a departure from the historically close economic ties between the two countries. The move was met with widespread condemnation from Canadian officials and business leaders, who argued that it would harm both economies. The tariffs were seen as a betrayal of the long-standing trading partnership and raised concerns about the future of North American trade. Ontario's Premier Ford didn't back down. He retaliated with a bold move of his own. Ford announced a 25% tariff on electricity exports to certain U.S. states, including New York. This was a strategic countermeasure. Ontario is a major electricity supplier to several U.S. states. This dependence on Ontario's power gave Ford significant leverage. The tariff was a clear message. Ontario would not stand idly by while its industries were targeted. The threat of an electricity shutoff added another layer of pressure. Ford warned that if the U.S. didn't reconsider its tariffs, Ontario was prepared to halt electricity exports altogether. This would have had severe consequences for the affected U.S. states, potentially leading to blackouts and economic disruption. The move was a calculated gamble, designed to force the U.S. to the negotiating table. The U.S. response was swift. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick engaged in direct talks with Premier Ford. The discussions were tense, but ultimately led to a temporary resolution. Ontario agreed to suspend its electricity tariff. This paved the way for further negotiations between the two countries. The temporary truce, however, was not a permanent solution. The underlying issue of the U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs remained unresolved. This meant that the threat of a trade war still loomed large. The 25% tariff resulted in a 100% increase in electricity costs for New York and other states receiving power from Ontario. The trade dispute had immediate consequences. The stock market reacted negatively, with the S&P 500 experiencing significant drops. The uncertainty surrounding trade relations made investors nervous. This led to a decline in market confidence, further fueling fears of an economic slowdown. Canada refused to accept the U.S. tariffs lying down. The federal government, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, retaliated with tariffs of its own. Canada imposed tariffs on 30 billion Canadian dollars worth of U.S. goods. These tariffs targeted key U.S. exports including agricultural products, consumer goods, and steel and aluminum products. The message was clear: Canada would defend its interests and would not hesitate to respond in kind. The trade war sparked a flurry of diplomatic activity. Meetings were scheduled between Canadian and U.S. officials to try and find a resolution. However, the rhetoric from both sides remained heated, making a quick solution unlikely. The trade dispute also highlighted the growing protectionist sentiment in the U.S., causing friction with other trading partners. The trade dispute's long-term impact remains to be seen. Some experts argued that the tariffs would ultimately harm both economies. They pointed to the integrated nature of the U.S. and Canadian economies, warning that tariffs would disrupt supply chains and lead to higher prices for consumers. Others argued that the tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and industries, even if it meant short-term economic pain. Despite the uncertainty, one thing was clear: the trade dispute had strained the relationship between the U.S. and Canada. It raised questions about the future of the North American Free Trade Agreement, which had long governed trade between the two countries. The dispute also underscored the importance of diversifying trade relationships to reduce reliance on a single partner. The trade war served as a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of the global economy. It showed how quickly trade disputes can escalate and the far-reaching consequences they can have. The future of US-Canada trade relations remained uncertain, with the possibility of further escalation or a negotiated settlement hanging in the balance.